Hey guys, welcome to my workshop. So today I'm going to show you guys how to do rear suspension bushes on a Ford Fiesta Mark 7. Now this is a real simple job, guys. I bought a kit off eBay, which I'll show you in the video. It come with the installation tools as well as the bushes. All I needed then was a basic set of tools, which I will list in the description with any links to anything I used. So check that out, and yeah, please hit the like and subscribe button, and let's take a look. So guys, what I've done now is I've raised the rear of the vehicle and put it on axle stands, and then I've put my trolley jack underneath the axle to take the weight. Now you don't need to disconnect the shock absorbers or remove the springs. We're just going to lower the front of the axle and remove the bushes. So as you can see here, I've got my jack there ready, everything's supported, and we'll start taking it off. The other thing is you want to be careful for the handbrake cables and the brake hoses. There is plenty of room, but obviously you don't want to come down too far because you will stretch the brake hoses, which you can see there. So now what we need to do is we need to remove this bolt, but as you can see it hits the fuel tank. So what we're going to do is remove the handbrake cable bracket, which we got to do on both sides, and then we got to remove the main bolt, but obviously on the passenger side we can't remove it because the tank's in the way. So we've got to remove these 3 bolts, 2 in front of where it mounts and 1 behind. You'll see as I take the camera behind now. And there she is, just up in there. Remove them 3 bolts only on the passenger side to allow the bracket to come down as well. There she is lowered, guys, so you can see there now the bracket's nice and loose. I can now take the bolt out because it's lower than the fuel tank, and we can drop the bracket off. And then just inside you can see there the bush is completely worn out and is just flopping around. Now on the other side, which is a bit worse than this side, you'll see that I've left the bracket in situ. So I've just removed the bolt and the handbrake cable bracket and then allowed it to drop with my jack. Now as you can see here, I haven't dropped it down too far, so the handbrake cables are still connected and both brake pipes, so we haven't got to rebleed the brakes or any of this. We can just remove these bushes and yeah, pop it back. So what I've done here, I've Tipp-X'd the bushes top and bottom. As you can see, there's a bit of a raise in the bush, and I've just marked it to the axle, and I'm going to drill the bush out. So I'll speed this up for you guys because I'm sure you don't want to watch this. So basically what I'm going to do is put a series of drill holes through the rubber. Now the rubber is only at the front and the back, hence why you have to mark where it comes out, because you need to put the new bushes back in the same place. So I'm just going to drill out all these bits of rubber, and then what we'll do is we'll remove the bush. Now the outer part of the bush is plastic, so it is quite easy to remove, but if you to knock the whole thing out, if you do it this way, you don't have to take the axle or really hold the axle too hard. You can just remove the bush in pieces rather than trying to press it out or knock it out with a big hammer or something. So yeah, so what I'm going to do now is just tap the center out of the bush and get that out of my way. So as you can see, so I've drilled it all through, and then I can just break it out. So now all I've got left is the outer plastic ring, which I'm going to have to remove. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get an axle, and I'm just going to take the blade out of the axle and then feed the blade into the center. Now I've actually put the blade on upside down here because it makes it a bit easier. I was always told to work smarter, not harder. So I've got the teeth facing in, and I'm just going to put a cut straight through the plastic. Now I will say, when I did the other side, I did actually not put a cut. I just chiseled it straight through the plastic, but it does mark the axle a little bit, and it takes a bit more to clean it up. So if you can just put a cut through the plastic, and then when you get your chisel and give it a tap, it comes out really easy, guys. So yeah, that's just what I'm doing here now, is cutting through it. And there we go. And then you can remove your blade and take your Hacksaw back out. Quite simple. So I'm going to take a long chisel now, any chisel will do, and I'm just going to tap it right by where I've made that cut. And obviously you can see the plastic outer race just kind of sticks in. So I'm just going to run it down the inside, and you'll see, once you've gone down, it's popped inside itself, it'll just fall out. So this way makes it a bit easier. I find it easier to do it in bits rather than trying to knock the whole thing out. It just makes it a bit simpler. Now the older models do have a metal race in, so it's a lot more difficult than these newer plastic ones. It makes it a bit easier, but I don't think they last as long in my honest opinion. So the next thing we're going to do now is clean out the inside of this axle, ready for the new bush. So I'm going to take a little sanding wheel for a drill, and I'm going to hook it into my drill and just give it a buff out. Now I will speed this up, guys. I'm sure you don't want to watch all this in normal speed, so we'll just fast forward all this. I just given it a good polish. You don't have to take the paint off, you just got to get it nice and clean. The last thing you want to do is your bush to twist or go tight halfway in, because once you start putting these bushes in, you want them to go all the way home. You don't want to have to stop halfway through. That can cause a real trouble. So yeah, I'm just going to clean it all up best I can and keep checking it with my finger just to make sure it's nice and smooth. Now there is a bit of a lip on the outside which allows the bush to basically start as you press it in. So make sure that that outer lip is nice and clean and you've got all the rust off there. Sometimes if there's a bit of rust lumped up, you can always just get a chisel and scrape it off, but this one's not too bad, so that's all nice and clean. Obviously everything we do on this side, guys, we do on the other side. So right, this is our kit. It comes with 2 bushes and a little installation tool, which is basically a bit of threaded bolt with a nut with a bearing on the one side and 2 bosses. Now you can see here how the bush is obviously side to side, so you've got to make sure you get him in the right place. I'll show you which way it goes once we get him in it. And so yeah, so this is the tool. Now I'm just going to pull the end bolt nut off, and basically you've got 2 bosses. Now the one boss has got a little bit of a drop in it, so if you look here, it's got a cutout. Now I gotta be honest, there is a bit of a step in the bush, but it doesn't line up, and it's actually wider than that anyway, so I don't actually know what that's for, but it works and I'm not going to complain. The only thing I did have to do is I found it didn't push the new bush all the way home, all the way around, so I just had to turn it a bit and just give it that last bit. So as you can see, there's the bush now that goes right at the back and onto the axle, and then the front bush pushes the new bush into, front boss pushes the new bush into place. Now one thing I did notice about these bushes, they have got a bit of a lead to get in, but mine was a little bit of a lump on the end. It wasn't very well machined. So what I'm going to do is just take a Stanley knife and just clean the lip off the edge. Now you will see there is a bit of a chamfer to the end of him, but for some reason in the manufacturing process they just didn't really clean it off very well. So something like this can make a really big difference when you're trying to get your bushes in straight. I can't explain how important this is. So make sure it's nice and straight, and the bush will just go in lovely, because the last thing you want it to do is twist and then obviously go in at an angle, and being plastic it'll just stretch and go out of shape, and it can be a bit of a nightmare. So that's something to check on yours, guys, and probably just give it a clean up. Now obviously, as you can see, there's a bit of a drop in the side of these bushes, and it's obviously that lines up perfectly with the top and bottom. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to mark a Tipex line in line with it and straight across the top of the bush, and you can see I'm going to line that straight up with my mark that I've put on the axle. So it makes it a bit make sure it goes in the right angle, guys, because this is obviously if you put it the wrong way it just won't work and your suspension will be all over the place. So yeah, so there's my obviously rear support put in with my thing. Now we all know what this is. I've covered it up for obvious reasons, but I'm just going to add a little bit of lube to get him in. Now obviously you don't want to put grease or anything like that. You don't want anything that's going to stay on there, so I use a little bit of washing up liquid. I'm not going to say which one, but we can all take a pretty good guess what I'm using. And yeah, I'm just going to apply a bit to the edge of, literally just to the leading part of the bush. I'm not going to cover it. I want it in there nice and tight, but I want it to go in nice and straight. So I want to give it every chance I can of starting, because it's once it goes in the first centimeter, guys, you've got it. You know, if it's nice and straight for the first centimeter, you can just wind it home. Then I would not advise using ear tools for this. Do it by hand. You can do it nice and slow and you can feel it. I am going to fast forward all this so you guys don't have to watch me wind the bush in, but I'm just going to wind the nut in and take up the play. Obviously you can see my line is nice and straight on the top, so I know my bush is going in the right position. Just make sure everything's nice and straight, and then use a spanner and just slowly wind it down. Now this front nut has got a bearing in it, so the other side you haven't got to hold it with a spanner or nothing. It will stay there. So just line him all up and then wind him down. So as you can see, I'm winding him nice and slow to start with, and you can see she's starting to pull at all sorts of angles. We just want to make sure she starts nice and straight, and then yeah, once she starts going, we can just wind it down then real quick, guys. So a bit of a slow process. I have sped this up for you so you don't have to watch me do it right through, but as you can see, just wind it down and it'll pull in nice. And at least if you do it with a spanner, you can see that it's going nice and straight, and you can see that it's not twisting, and that's the most important thing. You know, you got to make sure that it goes in straight, otherwise you're going to end up with trouble. And I got to be honest with you, I think if you have to have a second attempt putting these bushes in, I don't think they'll be any good. I think if you fail on the first time, they're going to you're going to go out of shape and you're not going to get them in. You're going to have to grind chunks out of them to get them in, and then I very much doubt they'll go in very tight. So make sure you get them nice and straight. Take your time, don't rush, and just make sure everything is lined up. You know, if you think it's going on a bit of an angle, back it off and start again. You know, you can't be too cautious with these. So yeah, we're just going to wind it down. Now, one of the things I'll say a bit earlier, but one of the things I did notice with this tool is this main boss for pushing in here has got a cutout on it. Now, I don't know if that's for a different model. This one definitely didn't need it. So basically what I found was when I got all the way to the bottom, I noticed that where the cutout was, it didn't push the bush all the way home. So what I noticed when I looked around it, that all the way around where it was raised, it was pushed back lovely, and then where the cutout was, there was a little bit of a gap. Right where I'm pointing my finger now, there's a bit of a gap there, so I'm not happy with that. So what I did was I just backed off the nut, and I basically turned the boss so that it obviously lined up with a different spot, and then I just give it another nip in. You don't have to dog these down, guys, as long as you'll feel it when it's tight. It just goes a bit firm. So I'll just give that boss, I see I've pulled the boss back now, and I'm just checking the lip all around to make sure it's gone all the way tight to the housing. So I'm just going to turn it so that cutout is somewhere else, and I'm just going to wind that in now and just give it another little push to get it home all the way. And yeah, to be honest, guys, if you didn't do this, it's not the end of the world, but I like it to be nice and all the way in there, and I ain't got to worry about it then. It's not going to come out anyway, because these things are quite big, and once they're in there, they're in there. You'd have to cut them to pieces to get them out. And there she is. So yeah, so that's how a bush is installed, guys. It is that easy. There is nothing difficult about this. This is one of the easiest jobs. I think everyone gets a bit worried because you automatically imagine you've got to take the axle off and do all this in-depth work, but it's actually really simple. You don't even have to take the shocks or the springs or the brake pipes or nothing. You just hang the axle down. I did put my axle stands quite high just to give me a bit of clearance to get under there, mainly for the cameras more than myself, but you know, there's nothing. It's nice when you've got a bit of room to get under there. So yeah, so I've checked she's home. She's all nice and flat up against the metal. So as you can see, my Tipex marks line up and she's nice and straight. And yeah, so that's all back together. Now I've lifted him in. I'm just going to show you obviously what it looks like all assembled. So I've got the bolt in nice and tight. I've got my handbrake cable bracket back on with my nut tight, and I've got my 3 bolts, 2 in front and 1 behind, all back in and tight. Obviously on the driver's side you only need the main bolt. where obviously on the passenger side, like I said earlier, you've got to take the bracket off, guys, otherwise you won't get the bolt out because it hits the fuel tank. So just something to remember, and it's that simple. So yeah, you'll be doing it in no time. And yeah, that's it, guys. So thanks for watching, and yeah, hope I helped. Have a good day.